North Carolina Dems and friends, welcome to the program. I'm Anderson Clayton, chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and here's what Democrats are talking about this week. North Carolina is in the middle of the fight for the future of our public schools, one that's been underway for a generation with no resolution in sight. And like so much of our state's most important policy, it all comes down to North Carolina's Supreme Court in a landmark case called the Leandro versus the state of North Carolina. So what is Leandro? In 1994, parents, students, and school districts in 5 low-wealth rural NC counties filed a lawsuit against the state of North Carolina, alleging that students in Cumberland, Halifax, Hoke, Robeson, and Vance counties were being denied their rights to a sound, basic education, something promised to every child in North Carolina by the state constitution. See, a large chunk of our funding for public schools comes from the county level. The county gets that money from property taxes, which means that the counties with wealthier residents have a much easier time covering their education budgets than counties with poorer residents. Simply put, there are counties in North Carolina where you can't simply raise enough money from property taxes to meet the needs of local public school systems. Here's where Leandro versus the state of North Carolina comes in. The North Carolina Constitution clearly states that it is the state's responsibility to provide a sound, basic education for all North Carolina children. When school districts are underfunded, kids are not getting a sound education, or even sometimes a basic one. Your zip code shouldn't determine whether or not you, your kids, or your neighbor's kids get access to a good education. The Supreme Court ruled that it's the state government's responsibility to make sure schools are properly funded. And the Leandro case affirms that going to a well-funded school is a right, not just a privilege in North Carolina. But the lawsuit was filed in 1994. The first Supreme Court decision wasn't made until 1997. And almost 30 years later, Republicans have undone Democrats' investments in public schools. And we are now ranked 48 out of all 50 states for per pupil spending. So what happened to Leandro, and where the hell is our school funding? Since the ruling, North Carolina lawmakers have known that funding public schools is a constitutional obligation. It's not optional. But the opponents of Leandro, Republicans, by the way, continued to claim that the money was too short of supply and that there's not enough money in the state budget to divert to public schools, especially the critically underfunded school districts like those from the original Leandro lawsuit. So after over a decade of hearings and partisan back and forth on how to best comply with the court's decision, an independent, nonpartisan research agency was tapped to conduct a review of the situation and finally get us a game plan for how to get our schools on track. According to that review, the North Carolina General Assembly would need to appropriate an additional $4.3 billion to public schools over the next 8 years, with another $1.2 billion in the mix for early childhood investments. The judge overseeing compliance with the Leandro ruling ordered the state of North Carolina and the State Board of Education to make an official action plan that would make it clear what qualifies as sound, basic education and how the state government would get our public schools to that standard. So in 2021, the Comprehensive Remedial Plan, commonly called the Leandro Plan, was officially submitted to the court. It's 2025 now, decades since this saga began, and the state of public education in North Carolina is proof that the Leandro Plan has not been followed. But why? Because the General Assembly is ignoring the courts. And that's why. You heard me. Republicans are just straight up ignoring the Supreme Court and the state constitution. Shouldn't be surprising to anyone listening to politics right now. The court said that the Republican-controlled General Assembly is responsible for funding our schools to meet their minimum responsibility of a sound, basic education. And they didn't. And don't buy the stories that they'll tell you about not having enough money. When Republicans were drafting the 2021-2022 state budget, there was a budget surplus of $4 billion, more than enough to cover the $1.7 billion the Leandro Plan needed to cover its first 2 years. And to make matters worse, by fall of 2021, North Carolina had over $9 billion in unreserved funds. The General Assembly, again led by Republicans, didn't just fall short of funding the Leandro Plan in full. They missed the mark by almost $800 million. There's no excuse for their refusal to fund Leandro. And while their budget fell hundreds of millions short of the requirement for public schools, they diverted $1 billion to an inflation reserve fund and another $1.6 billion to a savings reserve fund. The Republicans were putting money away in a rainy day fund. And well, newsflash, it's f***ing raining. And kids are going to school in crumbling buildings where the air conditioning doesn't work. Some schools are missing entire departments, entire middle schools starting their school year without an English teacher to their name. And Republicans hollowed out the Leandro Plan so they can make room in their budget to reduce the corporate tax rate in North Carolina to 0%. Republicans sold us out for corporations, and there are kids sweating in overcrowded classrooms paying the price for it. North Carolina saw the single largest exodus of teachers from the teaching profession in our history, leaving North Carolina for our neighbors. And yes, that includes moving to teach in South Carolina or just quitting altogether. Career educators are retiring early. Republicans are intentionally starving public education in our state. When Republicans took control of the North Carolina Supreme Court in 2022, they put Leandro in the crosshairs. They heard the case again with the intent of reversing the decision. But here's the thing. It's there in black and white. The right to a sound and basic education is the right of every North Carolinian child in our state constitution. So they can't reverse it. Not really. So instead, they've shelved it. The Republican majority court is refusing to issue a decision. By doing that, they're writing the Republican majority legislature a permission slip to do whatever the hell they want with the funds that should be going into public schools. I'm the youngest state party chair in the nation. So I'm saying this to all of the folks out there who are younger than I am, who really haven't known any different. It wasn't like this before. North Carolina used to be known across the country for having amazing public schools, for the innovation in education led by Democratic Governor Jim Hunt, who we still call the education governor, because of the work that he did for public schools. There are people in power right now who didn't think that the quality of your education was worth more than building up a bigger pile of unreserved funds. For those of you still in school, there are folks in the legislature and on the courts who are conspiring at this very moment to keep your teachers from getting a raise so that they don't have to work a second job, and to put off repairs to your school buildings in need and put more classrooms in temporary trailers to keep your class sizes twice the size they should be. I want you to know this isn't normal, because you need to remember what they took from you. When you go to the polls next November, someone really important is going to be on your ballot. The Republican majority Supreme Court is holding up the Leandro decision. So we need to take back the court, whatever it takes. And we can take back the court in North Carolina by 2028, but we have to keep Justice Anita Earls on the bench to do so. She's running for re-election in 2026, and if you believe in public education, she needs your vote to protect it. She is fighting the Republican scheme to undermine the Leandro case, but she's fighting an uphill battle while outnumbered. Her race is the only Supreme Court election on our ballot in 2026, so we have to keep her on the court and then work like hell to send her some help in 2028. Y'all can find out more about how you can support her by going to earlsforjustice.com. And before we go today, there's one last thing that you should know. Roughly 100,000 North Carolina voters are at risk of having their ballots challenged when they go vote this November. For a lot of the folks on the list, that's likely due to record-keeping errors that aren't even their fault. Check to make sure that you're not on the list by going to the Board of Elections website, which you can get sent to immediately by going to ncdp.org/repair. If you're on the registration repair list, fixing it is as easy as going to the DMV website to update your voter registration. It takes less than 5 minutes. Seriously. That's it from me today, y'all. Keep up the fight, and I'll see you next week.